This morning we are going to we'll do a slight review on our inventory. We made a decision in step 3, and then we immediately went to work at once to remove the things that blocked us from this decision. You know, there are certain things that blocked us, and there's no way that God could direct our lives. So we went to work to inventory and analyze and get rid of the resentments. We began that process in step 4. And in the first column, we listed the people, principles, and institutions that we resented. And we learned a lot from that. We learned, number one, how much these things have dominated our minds. And then in column 2, we listed the cause of that resentment beside each name from top to bottom. And after we got the cause down, we began to get to, I think, to what's really important, which basic instinct of life, which part of self-will was threatened, hurt, or damaged by this resentment. And we indicated those from top to bottom. And then we got to the 4th column, which is really, as we look at this, we can see that this is the basic information that we're seeking. We got to go through the doors of the first column to get the 2nd column. And then we got to use the second, go trace that cause to see what it hurt in column 3. And then we can look at the 4th column and really get to what we're looking for. It's very peculiar that a resentment begins in column 4. It starts with something within us. But we have to analyze it from the outside in, but it begins from the inside out. So now we get down to the real exact nature of the wrongs, and we look at and indicate that in the 4th column. So we have listed and analyzed these things. We have got down to the truth. We have gotten down to the 1st column, to the exact nature of what we really want to deal with and work on. And we have listed these things. These are the things that we're going to talk to another human being about. These are the things we're willing to let go, because later on our step said these things are objectionable to us. And these are the things we're going to ask God to remove. So we have completed this. We have listed and analyzed our resentments.
Let's see once again in that 4th column the exact nature of the wrongs, where we found that in the majority of the cases we looked to see the part we had played, and we found that we ourselves had set something in motion which created harm for those other people or institutions, and then they retaliated against us, and that created resentment for us. And we could see where we had used the resentment, playing it over and over, to transfer blame to them and free ourselves. Now, some of those resentments from the past, where we were children and perhaps we really didn't have anything to do with that incident, didn't do anything to start it, if we still carry that resentment, knowing what the resentment might do to us, knowing it might get us drunk, again, we need to look at that resentment very carefully and see if we're using it to rationalize doing things we shouldn't do, or just as important, not doing things we should do. And we can find the same character defects keep us holding on to an old resentment as the same character defects that caused the resentments in the first place. If we're still using a resentment from the past, then probably we're selfishly using it for some purpose. Or maybe we're not being honest enough with ourselves. Maybe we're really not looking at ourselves. We're concentrating simply on what they did to us. Maybe we need that resentment. Maybe we're so frightened we're afraid to face the world without it. Maybe if we could consider the fact that those people were sick who did those things to us, and kind of consider their situation, then perhaps we might be able to forgive those people from the past and get rid of those resentments. But if we're still carrying one of those, now I don't care what it is they did to us, if we're still carrying that resentment, knowing that it might get us drunk, then our own personality defects are causing us to continue to carry it and use it for some particular purpose. You know, those old resentments from the past are the greatest form of rationalization in the world. Hell, I can just justify anything in the world based on what they did to me. So my same character defects keep me using that resentment as would be the character defects that cause me to do things that cause resentments in the first place. So in either case, we need to be looking into the 4th column. We've listed them. We've analyzed them. We've got rid of them. We found the part within ourselves we'll need to change so we don't have to have them in the future. And a part of our mind has now been cleared away where it can be directed by God. Step 4 is an attempt to find and be rid of those things that block us off from God. The part of the mind that used to be blocked from God by resentments is now unblocked, and that channel is open. 1/3 of our mind has some peace, serenity, and happiness. Now let's look at the other common manifestations.
It begins at the bottom of page 67. Notice the word fear is bracketed along difficulties of Mr. Brown, Mrs. Jones' employee, and the wife. This short word somehow touches almost every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and cordoning thread. The fabric of our resistance was shot through with it. It set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But did not we ourselves set the ball a-rolling? Now we're going to look at, now he begins with fear, and we said that one of the other manifestations of self, people that are selfish and self-centered, is they begin to believe wrong, which is fear. And these fears dominate our minds. And if our mind is controlled by fear or the things we fear, then there's no way that God can direct our lives, because our lives are being directed by the things that we fear. And they control and dominate our lives. So the next process is to list and analyze these fears, to get to do the same process, get down to the truth and look at them and analyze them and get them out of our minds with the same process. Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It causes more troubles. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. And we use the same process. We simply fill out these columns from top to bottom. Again, what do I fear? And we write these from top to bottom. It's very easy to do, is to put them on paper. And I think we're going to see the real advantage of this. Now, you think your resentments look stupid on paper. Wait till you see your fears on paper. Go ahead.
We see in this first paragraph on page 68 basically the same instructions to look at fear that we had to look at resentments. But remember, Bill's not going to repeat himself exactly the same.
Yeah.
So he words it a little bit differently. But we see the same basic instructions. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. So column 1 on the new chart up here behind us, and in your handout sheet, a review of fears, is I'm fearful of. Now, we men tend to say, well, we don't have very many fears. You know, we're tough, we're macho. But we're not talking so much about physical fear as we are the fears of the mind. And I found the same thing with fear that I did with resentments. I didn't think I had very much fear. Yeah, 2 or 3, until I began to list them. And I find that we're fearful of a lot of things. For instance, I still have fear connected with my wife, Barbara. I still have fear connected with the Internal Revenue Service. I'm fearful of what other people think of me. I'm fearful about the police. You know, I have fears connected with my children. I have fears connected with my job. I have fears connected with, and I was absolutely amazed when I began to fill out sheet after sheet after sheet. You see, you can only see one fear at a time in your mind. And I don't think any of us will ever realize how much fear dominates our thinking until we put them all down on a sheet of paper. And we learn immediately the same thing we did with resentments, how much they do control our minds. And if fear controls our mind, then of course God can't. Column 2, why do I have the fear? Now, this is not an attempt to psychoanalyze ourselves. Now, I'm not going to say the reason I'm afraid of the dark is because Mother didn't change my diapers right when I was a year old. Some fear is necessary. Fear brings caution. Fear keeps us from getting hurt. We couldn't live without some fear. I'm supposed to be a little bit afraid of the dark. I don't have headlights. I can't see at night. And that kind of fear brings caution. But if it paralyzes me and keeps me from going outside after dark, then I better look at it pretty closely. I have some fear connected with heights. Why? I don't have wings. I can't fly. And that brings caution. But if that fear keeps me from even riding in an elevator, then I got a real problem with it. Most of my fears, I'm going to find there is a root cause within me, and usually something I myself have done to create that fear. The reason I still got some fear connected with Barbara is, if she ever really does find out what I was doing 20-some-odd years ago, she's probably going to file for divorce again, even today, after that period of time. The reason I have fears connected with the Internal Revenue Service is because I'm always cheating on my income tax. That's why. The reason I have fears connected with this and this and this, there's nearly always some reason that I myself have set the thing in motion. Column 3, what's the exact nature of the fear? I cannot feel fear unless there's a threat to one of my 3 basic instincts of life. If you threaten anything I have, if you threaten anything I plan to get in the future, in the social area, in the security area, or the sex area, then you're going to create fear. I cannot feel fear without a threat to one of those 3. For the first time in my life, I begin to see where fear comes from, just like I did with anger. I always thought fear just flitted through your mind, and it wasn't necessarily coming from anywhere. There wasn't anything you could do about it. But the first time I see fear comes from a threat to one of my basic instincts of life. You can do nothing about a problem till you see the problem. I could do nothing about anger until I saw where it comes from. I can really do nothing about fear until I see where it comes from. Column 4, what's the exact nature of the wrong? Now, the fear is the wrong. That's what blocks me off from God. Most fears are incorrect believing. You know, if all those things that you and I feared had happened to us, we sure wouldn't be sitting here in this room today. Most of our fears were incorrect believing. But what's the exact nature of the fear? And there sits that same old personality in the 4th column. If I wasn't so selfish, if I wasn't so afraid of losing something or not getting what I want, I wouldn't have to have so much fear. If I wasn't so dishonest, I wouldn't be cheating the Internal Revenue Service in the first place. And then I wouldn't have to be worried about what they're going to do when they catch me. If I didn't have such a frightened personality, I would be able to live with some peace of mind and serenity. If I would consider other people more than I do, I wouldn't be doing those things that hurt those people and then cause me to fear what's going to happen when they retaliate. I see basically the same personality in column 4 creating the fears that I did with the resentments. And if I don't change column 4, then I don't stand a chance. If I stay selfish, if I stay dishonest, if I stay self-seeking and frightened, if I stay inconsiderate, then I'm going to have to run with fear for the rest of my life. You know, it's amazing what these fears do to us. Fear not only blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, but fear keeps us from doing a lot of things we would really like to do. And at the same time, fear can keep us doing things we really should not be doing. You know, I just love to work with my hands. And all my life I wanted to build myself a set of beautiful kitchen cabinets. But I knew if I did, they wouldn't look very good. There would be a lot of mistakes. People would laugh and I would be embarrassed. So fear kept me from doing that for a long, long time. Finally, one day, after having worked the program a while, I decided I'd build myself a set of kitchen cabinets. Now, they don't look very good, and there's a lot of mistakes, and people laugh at them, but I really don't give a damn anymore. Fear keeps us from going back to school. Fear keeps us from learning to play the piano. Fear keeps us from doing a lot of things we would really like to do. At the same time, fear keeps us doing things that we know we shouldn't do, but we're afraid of facing life without doing some of those things. Fear effectively blocks us off from the sunlight of the Spirit, causes us to drink, just exactly like resentments. And if we don't get some kind of handle on it, we'll never have any peace of mind. We'll stay restless, irritable, and discontented. We'll continue to do those things which create shame, fear, guilt, and remorse. We block ourselves off from God, and eventually the mind will start searching for that sense of ease and comfort, take us right back to drinking, exactly like resentments. We'll never be entirely free of fear, but we can get it down to the level that God intends for it to be so we can use it for the proper purposes. Just like resentments, we'll never be completely free of resentment. Sometimes they are useful also. Right, Joe?
Right. You know, resentments, all of these things, and I think we need to look at, maybe get that point over, I hope. You know, so much we get confused when they say you got to get rid of something, but we don't have anything we have to get rid of. We don't want to look at that. I think our book is talking about, we see a plan of rearrangements or adjustments, not getting rid of anything, but maybe putting it back where it's useful. All these things we have are like resentments. Resentments are what really makes us competitive. When someone goes out and succeeds at doing something, it strikes our self-esteem, our ego, and if it makes us get up and do something, then, and this is why it makes us use our ability, this is a changing force in the world. The world would be, where would we be if we didn't compete with each other? So this is healthy resentments. We always use the illustration, if I'm living in a neighborhood and, you know, like my neighborhood is pretty run down, the house is kind of shabby, they need painting, and everybody's window panes broke out. It's just a bad neighborhood. Well, I've been living there for years. I'm satisfied with it. I come home every evening and sit on my porch and rock, and I just enjoy the hell out of it. And finally this guy moves in across the street. And one day I look up and he's painting his house, putting new window panes in. I say, who in the hell is this guy running the neighborhood, you know? Well, that hurts my ego, and I react to him. And it makes me, I look at my house and I say, well, you know, I believe I do a little fixing up. And it's my resentment toward him that makes me do something, and I fix up my house, and I get some window panes, and I work. And then my neighbor resents me, and he fixes his house. And that guy across the street resents him, and he fixes his house, and pretty soon God's got the whole place looking halfway decent. Well, that is what a resentment is for. That's in the right, proper use of it, and we all use it in that fashion too. You know, most of our progress comes from resenting other people, and it makes us do something. So that is a healthy use, but an alcoholic don't use that. He wouldn't do that. An alcoholic would never use it in that fashion. See, an alcoholic would come home every day, sit on his porch and rock, resent the hell out of that guy. And one night he'd go over and burn his damn house down. Same way about fear. You know, we use fear every day, healthy. Fear is a part of our lives. We couldn't live one day without fear. We couldn't. How could you cross the street? You couldn't cross a busy intersection. Why do you use a pot holder when you pick up a hot pot? Fear. We have to have fear as a part of our life. And we're not going to get rid of fear, surely. If we did, we'd be in the hell of a shape. But what we're going to do is try to put it back where it belongs. And no one has ever been perfect with these things either. So we're just trying to grow. We're trying to make some rearrangements and some adjustments. So what we're going to do is, as we put these things, and as we set a list and analyze them, about 99% of your fears will leave you when you put them on paper, because they do look double dumb on paper. They look pretty good in your head. When you get them on paper, they look altogether different. And then we have some deep-seated fears that we might have. And remember what we did with those deep-seated resentments. We prayed about them. We're going to use prayer on those deep fears. See, there is no way that you could enter in communion with God about a fear and keep in a pattern of fear, because this would leave you if you use prayer on fear. So the deep-seated fears we're going to use prayer on. And we have the second prayer in step 4. We had a prayer on resentment. Now we have a prayer on fear. We never apologize to anyone for depending upon our Creator. We can laugh at those who think spirituality is a way of weakness. Paradox is a way of strength. The verdict of ages that faith means courage. All men of faith have courage. They trust their God. They never apologize for God. Instead, we let Him demonstrate through us what He can do. Then we have our fear prayer. We asked Him to remove our fears and to direct our attention to what He would have us be. At once, we commenced to outgrow fear.
You talk about promises. There's one of the biggest promises in the big book right there. We ask God to remove our fear and ask Him to direct our attention to what He would have us be, and at once we commence to outgrow that fear. As Joe said, 95% of them are going to disappear. They really do look stupid on paper. But some of those fears will be ingrained, very deep. Some of them we have probably been using them for years to rationalize, justify, and etc. And some of them we may have to ask God to remove those fears and direct our attention to what He would have us be instead. But as we do that, and those fears begin to disappear, that file cabinet that I had over here yesterday in this side of my store that was filled with fear has now been emptied out. God will not leave a hole in my head. As the file cabinet is emptied out, those fears will have to be replaced with something else. They can only be replaced with the opposite, which is courage and faith. And suddenly I find myself able to do many, many things that I could never do before, because now I can operate on courage. I found myself able to quit doing some of those things that I felt that I had to do, because now I can live on courage and faith. I did not have to go read any other books to get courage and faith. I didn't have to search outside of me to find that. If God dwells within me, that's always been a part of my makeup. But I never really could operate on it, because in my chase for money, power, prestige, and sex, I always put myself in those positions where I had to feel and experience and operate on fear. But now that the fears are gone, the faith and the courage can start coming to the surface. And suddenly I find that life is a lot simpler and a lot easier than it used to be. Mine now, 2/3 of my little store has been straightened up, and in 2/3 of it I have peace of mind, serenity, and happiness, where I used to have nothing but resentment and fear. Automatically I'm going to start feeling better. I'm not near as restless, not near as irritable and discontented as I used to be, and life becomes much better. We've done the same thing with fears that we did with resentments. We're taking step 4. In the 4th column, we see the exact nature of the wrong. The fear is the wrong, but I see the exact nature of it that I'm going to talk to another human being about in step 5. I see those things that I'm willing to get rid of in step 6. That old selfish, self-centered, dishonest, inconsiderate character sitting out there. I see those things I'm going to ask God to take away in step 7. And to my amazement, I'll find that the majority of the people on the fear sheet are also those that I have harmed in some way or other. And I have to experience fear associated with them. What amazes me is the same names keep popping up over and over on both sheets. Not always, but usually the same names. Barbara was there, the Internal Revenue Service was there, and I can just list name after name after name that was on both sheets. So I have taken care of now the second common manifestation of self.